Yes. Hey, Odike Oshada with the Anyezo. All right, please, a round of applause for him. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. All right, please. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to the second Distinguished Speaker Series on Foreign Direct Investment. And today, we are very honored to have with us here the Honorable Alan Kyerematen. Please, a big round of applause for him. He is indeed a very distinguished trade expert, and for, I bet, all of my life, he has been doing trade policy implementation and development. And so we all grew up knowing him as the man from Enterprise Africa, all the way to when he introduced the AGWA. I was then in university, final year when he started AGWA. He came to Legon to talk to us about being entrepreneurs under the African Growth and Opportunity Act then. And he's been on and on, worked through the process, and today we have him as our distinguished speaker. He's also the leader for the Movement for Change and presidential candidate in our December elections. Please, a big round of applause for him. We are live on City 97.3 FM. We're also live on Kingdom FM. And our partners, as usual, are the American Chamber of Commerce, CCI France, the Euro Chamber, the Canada-Ghana Chamber of Commerce, the Ghana-Netherlands Business, Culture and Culture Council. We have the Spain-Ghana Chamber of Commerce, the Japan External Trade Organization, and the Ghana-South Africa Business Chamber. So please, a round of applause for all our organizers today for helping us. And for all those our board members and directors and presidents who are with us, let's see you, give us a wave. All presidents and board members of the trade associations, thank you for allowing us to begin this process of holding discussions on foreign direct investment. The Honorable Alan Kyerematen is accompanied by his running mate, Lawyer Danso, from the, yes. Lawyer Danso, thank you for, I hear you are here with your spouse as well, but we haven't seen her. She's around. We say thank you for allowing Lawyer Danso to be running mate to the Honorable Alan Kyerematen. So please, a big round of applause for her too. We will not bore you so much, so we'll begin by calling on Mr. Sekou Coulibaly, who is the president of the France Chamber, to give us his opening remarks, and then we'll take it up from there. So please, let's welcome Mr. Sekou Coulibaly.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed members of the business community, good evening. I want to welcome you to this very important event on foreign direct investment. The Chamber of Commerce and Industries of France and Ghana is very, very honored to sponsor this event as a lead sponsor, but needs to thank all the collaborators, such as the American Chamber of Commerce, who has spearheaded this initiative. So a big round of applause to our partners and to the leadership of Kimantu. Thank you very much. I also want to thank the Ghana-Netherlands Business and Culture Council, the Spain-Ghana Chamber of Commerce, the Ghana-South Africa Business Chamber of Commerce, and the Canada-Ghana Chamber of Commerce, as well as, last but not least, the Japan External Trade Office. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for our partners. Thank you very much. This collective effort underscores our shared vision for Ghana's economic development. FDI is a key driver of economic progress, fostering job creation, technology transfer, and industrial growth. It's a critical part of the development of emerging countries. However, in the past few years, Ghana FDI has faced challenge in recent years. From a high $3 billion in 2017 to $649 million in 2023, it's seen a strong decline, a concerning decline for the most of us. This call for urgent action to attract investment and restore confidence in Ghana as a global capital destination. Our distinguished guest today, His Excellency Mr. Alan Kyerematen, has been at the forefront of Ghana's trade and economic development for decades. As Minister of Trade and Industry from 2017 to 2023, and in his prior roles as Ambassador to the United States and a trade advisor at the United Nations, Mr. Kyerematen has played a pivotal role in shaping Ghana's industrial policy. His leadership in initiatives like the One District, One Factory, and his effort to secure the Africa Continental Free Trade Area headquarters in Ghana have laid the foundation for a more decentralized and resilient economy. His Excellency, Mr. Kyerematen, understands how FDI is important in shaping the development of a country, and in his early career, it has been marked by experience in one of the largest multinational corporations, Unilever, where he was a senior corporate executive. His vast experience in both the public and private sector, combined with his vision for economic transportation, makes him an essential voice as we seek to revitalize FDI in Ghana. As the founder for the Movement for Change and the 2024 presidential candidate, His Excellency Mr. Kyerematen continues to champion initiatives that will drive Ghana's economic growth. For me, it's a tremendous honor, not only as the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of France, but also as a former CEO of L'Oréal West Africa. I've had the opportunity to meet Mr. Alan Kyerematen, and I can say that I wouldn't be in Ghana if it wasn't for him. I'm the first example of his FDI in Ghana because he actually contributed into my naturalization and my investment in the country. So I'm a bit biased, but I'm very grateful and honored to introduce Mr. Alan Kyerematen to the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you very much.
My colleague, comrades of the Alliance for Revolutionary Change and the leadership of the Movement for Change, the distinguished captains of industry, excellencies, members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start first by expressing my profound gratitude to the Coalition of Chambers for inviting me as one of the distinguished speakers in this series. My understanding is that I'm here because I am the leader of the Movement for Change, and I'm contesting to become the first non-partisan presidential candidate to become president of Ghana. In that regard, I think it is only appropriate that I start off by telling you what has inspired the establishment of the Movement of Change. Because without that, I do not have any locus to be speaking to you. If there was ever a time in the history of our country when there has been a compelling need for change in our country, that time is now. And I say so for a number of reasons. First, if you go around the length and breadth of this country, there's only one clarion call. We want change. And so the movement has been established in response to this clarion call. And we've done so for 10 strategic reasons. Number one, there's no doubt in this country that Ghanaians want to move beyond the duopoly of the NPP and the NDC. And why are Ghanaians looking to change and move beyond the duopoly? First, after 32 years in government in this country, we find that, regrettably, Ghana is still in economic crisis. Kindly, even the medium-term outlook for our economy is so frightening that it becomes very difficult to appreciate and understand how we can justify a continuation of either the MPP or the NDC. If after 32 years we are in the IMF for the 17th time, then obviously it requires a change. But secondly, and equally important, is the division in our body politic that has been occasioned by this duopoly. Every single issue in this country has become politicized. It's NDC, it is MPP. Now, obviously, a divided country cannot stand. So there's the need for a referee who stand in between the two warring factions and keep them quiet. That's the only way Ghana will rise again. Thirdly, the winner takes all syndrome that has been associated with this duopoly is counterproductive to the interest of our country. How do we explain the fact that if NDC is in power, it's all about NDC and nobody else? If MPP comes into power, it's all about MPP and nobody else. That means that we are not harnessing the collective talents and strengths of all Ghanaians. And I do not see how, as Ghanaians, we can accept this. After so many years, there's a need for us to move beyond that syndrome. Number 4, there's the need for a more representative government, a more inclusive government. So, do we need the private sector to plead with government, to sit down with government to address the issues associated with the private sector? I don't think that is the way to go. Do we need the labor unions to have to continuously position themselves against government to make their voices heard? I don't think that's the case. And it goes on with all different stakeholders in our society. So it is time for us to bring other stakeholders into our governance architecture and not to leave it only to politicians. Number 5, the prevalence of this duopoly has led to a discontinuity in government, in the execution of government projects. It is clear. Look, NDC is fighting to come into power. As soon as they come, you can be sure that most of the projects that have been initiated will be discontinued. The MPP did the same, exactly the same thing. Some of the viable, good projects that were implemented by the NDC were not continued. So it's just like musical chairs. And I don't think this is something that needs to come, because this is a cost to government. If we continue to discontinue projects that have been initiated by one government after the other, it's a cost to government. that it constitutes financial loss to the state. Number 6, there's a clear need for us as a country to move beyond manifestos. Because as we know, whether it is in Ghana or in Europe or in the United States, manifestos are a catalog of promises. It's a wish list of promises. I want to stabilize the economy. How you do it is not part of the manifesto. And so you have promises that are made by us as politicians, and there's no capacity for execution, because at the time we make those promises, there's no indication of how the promises will be delivered. So we need to move beyond manifestos to a national development plan. Number 7, the two dominant parties have failed to deal substantively with the problem and challenge of corruption. Right now, there's a debate between the two parties, which one is more corrupt than the other. I don't want to be part of that debate. Number 8, the two parties have failed to deal again substantively with the issue of Galamsey. And this is an existential threat. And I don't think that we need, as Ghanaians, to take this lightly. It is time for us to bring into leadership new leaders who have the capacity and the political will to deal with the problem, because that's where the challenge is. Number 9, it is obvious that there's the need for significant constitutional reforms. The quality of governance in our country is bad, and a lot of it derives from the fact that we have not been able to make the changes in our constitution that will help improve our governance. And last but not the least, and it's not the icing on the cake, I would say it's the real deal, the need for a mindset change in this country. The lack of discipline, the lack of respect for the rule of law, the arrogance of power, all these things are characteristics of a Ghanaian culture. Not culture in the traditional culture, but the current state of the Ghanaian mindset. And this has to change. So, if you have these 10 very compelling reasons why there's the need for change, then I want to recommend myself to you as the corporate sector with foreign investors to think seriously about what I'm telling you. And that's why I'm here. But beyond the reason why there's a need for change, again, if there was ever a case where there's a compelling need for FDI, that period is now. Again, why do I say so? Traditionally, there are 4 sources of development financing or development funding. Number 1, obviously, would come from internally generated revenue from the economy, either through taxes or other sources of revenue. Traditionally, that would be the first major source of financing your development agenda. Secondly, would be your domestic savings, because in every economy where you have a high level of savings within the economy, that in itself becomes a channel for financing development. And that is why if you go to any country with a very low savings ratio, you find that they are unable to finance their development. Now, the third window, strangely enough, in most developing countries, is to rely on development assistance from our development partners, official development assistance. It is very clear that the appetite of our development partners and our friends has been going down gradually. And at any rate, why do you want to rely on friendly development assistance to propel your own development? It's not sustainable. They can only help you so far, but that is not the key to financing your development. So the first window is close to us because we have never been able to mobilize enough resources internally to finance our development. The second window, regrettably, is also not available to us because we don't even earn enough for us to be able to use savings to drive our development agenda. Unfortunately, the third window is also essentially close to us. As I said, you cannot continue relying on external development assistance. So if you want to be very realistic, the only window that seems to be open to us is foreign domestic capital. And that is why we need to take FDI very seriously. And all over the world, there are general conditions precedent, as lawyers, we talk about conditions precedent for attracting FDI. The fact that it is the only window open to us does not mean that it will be kept open forever or that automatically FDI would flow into your country. There are a number of conditions precedent which your country needs to fulfill before you can have an inflow of FDI. Number one is political stability. And here, I have to be very careful. I don't want to define what political stability is and what type of governance architecture will lead to political stability. But political stability is stability. Whether it is a traditional Western governance architecture or whether it's a constitutional monarchy or whichever way you look at it, as long as you have political stability, you fulfilled one of the conditions precedent for the inflow of foreign direct investment. Number two is economic stability. And this is often underpinned by strong macroeconomic fundamentals. If you have a weak economy, forget about attracting foreign investment. And political stability is not the same as economic stability. You can have political stability if your fundamentals are weak and your economy is weak. You cannot expect to be able to attract foreign direct investment. Number three is to be able to, let me show that. Yes, is to ensure that you have a reasonable level of reliable infrastructure. Yes, you can have the most stable political environment. Your economy could be stable, but if your infrastructure is bad, don't expect to be able to attract FDI. Then you need a pro-business enabling environment, which has to be reflected in the ease of doing business. Number six, you have to have a fair and equitable judicial system that recognizes the sanctity of contracts. So, political stability is great, economic stability is great. You can have the best infrastructure, but if you don't have a fair and equitable judicial system, capital, particularly from foreign sources, would evade you. Then you also need to have a safe and secure environment for your citizens. Look, investors want to make money. There's no doubt about that. That's why they are called investors. But they also want to stay alive to enjoy the fruits of their labor. So you need safe, secure environment. Then you also need social cohesion. In any environment where you have political, social, ethnic, and religious strife, it is very unlikely that you'll be able to attract FDI. Then you also need skilled and trainable workforce. There's no investor who will put his money in your country and base that upon bringing almost every employee from abroad. That is expensive, and it's not, as the Americans will say, it ain't gonna happen. And so you need to have skilled, trainable workforce if you want to be able to attract FDI. And but not the least, you need to have a strategic location which is close to markets. It's either you have a big domestic market or your location provides access to large global markets. So these are conditions precedent for any country to be able to attract FDI. Now, regrettably, although Ghana for a very long time has been one of the, I would say, most attractive investment destinations, if you look at my 10-point conditions precedent, you'll find that gradually we are losing our competitiveness as a prime investment destination. And that's something that we need to think seriously about. So how does the movement for change hope to respond to these conditions precedent? We've done so comprehensively in our policy blueprint, which is a great transformational plan. I don't know whether we've made copies, we've gotten copies, but I hope that we can leave you with copies of this great transformational plan, because that is going to be the basis for restoring confidence in you as investors, not to abandon Ghana. Because I know that many of you have started having what I would call second thoughts about whether you need to continue to stay in Ghana. Yes, there's hope, and you can find that hope in the great transformational plan. And I just very quickly before I close want to draw attention to some of the critical components of the GTP that should help revive hope in you as foreign investors. Number one is the political will to support FDI. If there's no political will, it ain't gonna happen. Look, I used to go to China in the early 90s, and there was one very strange condition that drew my attention to something that might have been happening in China. This is the early 90s. Now, as soon as you got out of the airport and you went into the city, particularly Beijing, you find lined up almost everywhere in the capital smiling faces of young boys and girls, Chinese boys and girls. So for the period that I was in China, I was wondering, what the hell is going on here? Why is everybody so welcoming? Because that was not the image that we had of China. It was only after a few years that I realized that the revolution that had been led and occasioned by one of the most transformational leaders of China, Deng Xiaoping, had just occurred around the turn of that decade, around 1989, 1990. So there was political will. It was a strategic decision by China to open up to the world. So it was not happening by chance. It was an intentional decision and plan to bring the world into China. And that requires political will. And that's what an Alan Kyerematen government would do to Ghana. Because this attitude that, oh, why do we have to provide all these incentives? After all, do we really need their capital? That is a retrogressive mindset. And let us remember that it's not only Ghana that is the beautiful chick around the world. There are so many attractive investment destinations, even including the developed world themselves. So that political will starts from the top. And it's only when it starts from the top that the generality of the public, including the public servants, that understanding would emerge. Number two is building an enterprise economy. The fact of the matter is that if you do not have an enterprise economy, and an enterprise economy is an economy that is driven by business, that is driven by the private sector. It is only when you have an enterprise economy that FDI would appear on your radar. And that is what the GTP, the Great Transformational Plan, is about. We are not talking about 24-hour economy. We are talking about an enterprise economy that is driven by business and the private sector. Number three is establishing a strong macroeconomy and investing in the productive sectors of Ghana. If you look at the GTP, we've made fundamental, far-reaching proposals for stabilizing our macroeconomy, from optimizing our revenue, expenditure management and control, stabilizing our currency, lowering taxes, ensuring that we have low inflation, making sure that we bring interest rates down to single-digit interest rates, making sure that we deepen our capital markets, and all the very important macroeconomic indicators. If you have the opportunity to read the GTP, you will have absolutely no doubt in your mind that change is on the way coming. And I think that we should take this very seriously. Then it's about optimizing benefits to our investors. FDI would only come and be sustained if there's a clear path of optimization of benefits to investors. So it's not just a question of economic opportunities, because there are economic opportunities literally every part of the world. But it is being able to optimize the benefits, increasing the yield on your investment. That is the most attractive stimulus for foreign direct investment. And all that is guaranteed under the GTP. But it's not just about optimizing benefit to investors. It's also about optimizing benefits to the local economy. And I want this to be very clear. If Alan is president, I can guarantee that you optimize your benefits. But I also want to make sure that we agree between ourselves that your investment also optimizes benefit to the Ghanaian economy. It's also about promoting joint ventures. Everywhere that FDI has become sustainable, it is inextricably linked to empowering local entrepreneurs through joint ventures and different forms of subcontracting arrangements. You cannot have a regime of foreign investment that is isolated from the local enterprise economy. And that is why our model in the GTP enhances the attraction of FDI, but also promotes joint ventureship and collaboration with the local enterprises. I think that is very important. The GTP also emphasizes on the transfer of technology and then of skills. FDI obviously comes with transfer of capital, because that's what it is about. But it must also bring along with the capital technology, innovation, and skills. And that is how we optimize the benefits of FDI. Also, we want the FDI to be anchored on research and development, because we all know that the world is divided between rich and poor because of technology and research. And that is why we want the FDI culture to be enforced and reinforced in Ghana, but along with it, accompanied by research and development. We want also our FDI regime to lead to sustainable development and the protection of environment. Yes, I'm all for FDI, but we want to be sure that our foreign direct investment is not injurious to our environment, and that it actually promotes sustainable development of our environment. We've also provided assurances under the GTP about a new culture of zero tolerance for corruption. Zero tolerance for corruption. And also introducing critical reforms in governance, including public sector reform. And last but not the least, we want to assure you of a mindset and attitudinal change, which is the only way that we can have dual benefit to the economy and also to our investors. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished captains of industry, these were just opening remarks to lead us into our conversation tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, please, a round of applause for him. Thank you. Sir, you're not going to sit down. We'll offer you a seat here. Yes.
Oh, please sit.
Thank you. So you take the first. No, the first one. Yes. So we can all see you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome the Senior Vice President for Cosmos and the former AmCham President, Mr. Joe Mensah, who will take over the conversation. Over to you, Mr. Mensah.
Well, thank you, Simon, and thanks for the delivery. I think you pretty much covered almost every question that we have listed from the team, so that's quite exciting. But I want to maybe limit my questions in my discussions with you to give the opportunity for the other chambers to also ask questions as we go on. So I will ask just a few questions and I'll turn over. I want to start from a philosophical point of view, which is the fact that you talked a lot about almost all the problems that we all see in our country. We have a beautiful country, and we all want it to do better for all of us. The philosophical question that I want to ask is that there's a phrase that says, it takes a village to raise a child. And that actually originated from West Africa. It's all over the world today, but it originated from West Africa. And it simply means that it has to be a community event, raising a child. Everyone partakes in it. We have evolved to a point where self-interest seems to dominate almost everything that we do. And I've always quoted Mandela, who says, discipline and hard work will always make you successful. You did mention discipline in here. I want to find out, how do you bring that discipline into our DNA? Because the tenets of good leadership, it's the fact that when you leave office or wherever you are, what you've left with the people is really changed for the better, where people can actually would have experienced you being there. Now, yes, infrastructure is good and all of that, but if you're a leader and you leave and your people are now behaving in a way that's commensurate to good movement, good direction, that's when you really change society for the better, because we need to change our narrative. So I'd like for you to expand. How do we bring that discipline into our DNA? Because it starts by developing a child with a community, growing up. All these people are eventually going to end up, political leadership or what have you. If we don't start well with the foundational stuff, you're not going to get the best out without you. How do you actually start the process?
Thank you very much, Joe. Joe, I think it's all about first leadership. And I'm happy that I already identified that as one of the key pillars for inspiring this movement for change, establishing the movement change. The reason why I start with leadership is the fact that the citizens derive their emotions and their direction and their stimulus from their leaders. So if you have a disciplined leader, almost by logical extension, you can be assured that it will trickle down. But I would say it is not 100% guaranteed that leadership, by example, will lead to a discipline. But what you need beyond the leadership is also the institutional culture that is established within the country. So if you are disciplined as a leader and you don't put in place the institutional structures that impose discipline on the people, it ain't gonna happen. So you will be disciplined, but the structures don't encourage anybody to respond to this whole very important need for discipline. So it's about leadership, personal leadership. It's about institutions. And when we talk about institutions, it's almost like trying to identify right from the onset, what is it that is driving the indiscipline? Because like every problem, it starts with an analysis of the problem. It may be that the incidence of discipline is a symptom of a deeper problem, or a deeper cause. So just looking at it as lack of discipline may never get you to the solution. So you need to do an analysis of the direct and indirect causes of the indiscipline. And then it is only on that basis that we can start looking at customized solutions on the basis of each strand of the problem. So I think that it's important that you are highlighting this ahead of our conversation, because that's where it all starts and that's where it all ends. I was lucky that immediately after graduation from university, I was lucky to go into the corporate sector. And one of the best companies in Ghana then, and I believe even now. So the institutional and corporate culture that I worked in, and at a very early age, about 22 years, I was already a manager in a company that normally you need about 30, 40 years before you even rise. So basically, I think that the institutional culture, everywhere we work, must be also a major part of the solution.
Great. Thank you for that comment. And I think, I couldn't agree with you more. We need to continue to talk about it more
Yes,
and be able
yeah.
to put that into practice. And I
And-
think
and
that
in fact, if you are a leader and you do not even isolate or think about the lack of discipline as a problem, then obviously there's no starting point.
that's true.
So the first is a recognition of the fact that discipline and lack of discipline is a problem in Ghana.
Thank you. You mentioned, you talked about corruption, which has been the elephant in the room all the time that we talk about. And it's easier to say, yes, our rate of corruption. Could you actually expand on it a bit to show us how you could do, because one of the things you also mentioned is the fact that when a party is in power and a project that started with previous government does not get continued,
Yeah,
it gets changed. It's all part of it.
yeah.
How do you actually effect this? And then also, thinking about the fact that you also mentioned about constitutional change. We hear that year after year after year, administration after
And it's not happening.
and it's not happening. How do we actually make this happen for us to
Yeah.
effect the change we're looking
And again, I'm happy that you are highlighting for me the biggest constraints to our development in Ghana. Discipline, corruption. I'm sure the others will follow. But that's why I always want to make reference to the Bible, because that's where if you go into the GTP on the governance section, you find that we have highlighted very specific fundamental policy recommendations for dealing with corruption. And I want to say this, even at the risk of sounding repetitive. It's about leadership. It's about leadership. That's the starting point. People around you and the whole of the country should appreciate that there's no room around Alan for corruption. There's no room. And I've said openly that I've never been corrupt and I'll never be corrupt. And it's not easy for politicians to be that confident, you know, but I can tell you that's where it starts from. And once people get the signal that Alan has no room to tolerate corruption in and around himself, I'm sure that the signal will be strong. However, it goes beyond that. The second is about the institutions that have been established to deal with corruption. Kindly, Yoko is presumed to be dealing with corruption. CID, police CID, is presumed to be dealing with corruption. Office of the Special Prosecutor says they are dealing with corruption. Shiraj believes that they are mandated to do with corruption. So there are multiplicity of institutions that believe that they have the mandate to deal with corruption. And everybody's work is nobody's work. And that is why, beyond the example of leadership, I've made it very clear that we will consolidate all the corruption-related provisions on corruption in our legislation. Consolidate that into one enabling legislation. Define corruption properly. As I speak now, there is no one definition of corruption. Is chronism corruption? I do not know. And there are many other entry points for corruption which are not necessarily reflected in our current legislation. So I've made a commitment that I will consolidate all the provisions related to corruption and put it in one enabling legislation so that there's no confusion about what corruption is and who is responsible for corruption. And I'll put in charge of this all-powerful institution what I've described as an anti-corruption czar. And you know, when we talk about czar, you know what we are referring to. An anti-corruption overlord who will not derive his prosecutorial authority from the Attorney General. Kindly, the office of the special prosecutor is constrained, because the power to prosecute is a derived or delegated power from the Attorney General. But in the new dispensation that I'm proposing, the overlord does not draw his authority from the Attorney General. So the Constitution, the reform would clearly separate the prosecutorial responsibilities for the corruption-related offenses and for all other offenses. And in this particular case, it means that the new corruption overlord could prosecute even the president. And that's how it should be. And because in the new reforms, the president will not be the appointing authority.
Who will be the appointing authority?
We are creating a second chamber of parliament made up of representatives from the private sector, from academia, from civil society, from the labor unions, from traditional authorities. That is going to be the oversight, the real oversight over executive action. Right now, there's too much control in the hands of the president. And that's part of the challenge that we have with bodies and institutions that are supposed to be independent under the remit of the Constitution, but in actual fact, they are not independent. So I've made proposals to abolish the Council of State and introduce a second chamber that eventually will be the approving authority for the appointment of not just the new overlord for corruption, but other heads of independent constitutional bodies. The Electoral Commissioner ought not to be appointed by the president.
Who has to appoint?
Yes, the second chamber would make the final decision on their, so that you can have the independence to be able to take decisions with or without the consent of the executive.
But if you're creating a new chamber here,
Yeah.
wouldn't you need parliamentary approval for that?
Well, that's a constitutional part of the constitutional reforms.
Yeah.
So you need parliamentary approval.
Yeah.
Yes. So it will go to parliament. All the constitutional reforms that we have proposed will go through parliament.
But I made mention in my statement earlier that we have talked about constitutional review for
Yes.
15 years.
Yes, yes.
And work gets done. And then when the work is done, it gets
There's no
shelved.
movement.
There's no
It's
movement.
because of the duopoly.
How do we move it?
It's because of the duopoly. You see, once you have a duopoly, you will always have that division. If you have a government of national unity, as I'm proposing, NDC is in there, MPP is in there, CPP, Movement for Change, the private sector is there. I mean, basically, it's a government of national unity. So when there's agreement on reform, there's no hidden agenda driven by any other party. And then also, there has to be an implementation plan. Anybody who has experience in corporate management and governance would understand that just having a plan does not mean that you have execution. So there has to be an execution and implementation plan, which has been missing from all the work that so far has been done on the Constitution. But at the center of it is this duopoly. And if you go into it, it's because NDC and MPP are refusing to agree on which reforms ought to be escalated and those that ought not to be. It's not about MPP or NDC, it's about Ghana.
That is true.
It's about Ghana. And so I think that once we move beyond the duopoly, a lot of these things will fall in place.
But yeah, that is true. But the interesting thing, though, is that assuming you get into office tomorrow as president, you are going to inherit NPP and NDC. And you need cooperation of them to be able to move anything. How do you actually go and effect that change to be able to now start moving the agenda?
Yes, because if you are going into government as a government of national unity, then by logical implication, that's the kind of architecture you have. So you would have, yes, NDC parliamentarians you have MPP parliamentarians, you have people in parliament who are independent. But the thing is that there's a difference between the executive, and then the legislature.
Yeah.
And so if you are creating a platform for different stakeholders to be part of the governance architecture, then that in itself contains the solution to the problem. I know some people have said, oh, but if the MPs in parliament refuse to be part of the government, and I say, Joe, I mean, you mean Ghana, that somebody has come into parliament and he has the honor and privilege of being accorded the honor, of representing his party and his people as a minister. That would be the best thing that would have happened to them. So that's not a problem at all. It is the new architecture that will dictate. Once it is from the beginning appreciated that this is a government of national unity, immediately it reduces the tension.
That's true.
Because you have Joe in government from NPP, you have Charlie, NDC, and so you are in. You see, because what is the purpose of Parliament? Is to make laws. That's basically what it is. So the convergence in the interest of Ghana can only occur when you have a non-partisan president, who is seeking to bring everybody together.
All right, let's wish you well, and hopefully we can get this and accomplish. It will be wonderful for us to see us working. I will ask you one last question and then move on because in interest of time. We talked about foreign investment. Foreign investment. One of the things that I read, in the World Bank ratings is the fact that last time we had this session, immediately after, two people ran into me and said, one thing that nobody ever talked about was remittances that coming from abroad. And come to find out, when he said that, I went home and did some checking. And I promised that when I come the next time, I'm going to be asking those questions. And that is, foreign remittances coming into the country is second to export. Today, as we said, it's about $5.7 billion. That's significant. And yet nobody talks about it. How would you really take that huge number here and try to do something about it to help drive this economy that we find in trouble today?
Remittances, by definition, are meant to be remittances. But it is the responsibility of government to recalibrate remittances and channel that into investment capital. See, there are three types of capital coming in. There's FDI, there's portfolio capital through stocks and other forms of money market operations. And there's remittances. That's also capital in a sense. But right now, we are not using remittances as an instrument for development. So somebody sends you $100 every month, and it directly goes into consumption. There is no opportunity to actually invest that and basically channel it into investment capital. And if we're doing that, those who are bringing in remittances could actually earn more nominally from their remittances than they are currently earning. So you bring in $100, that becomes part of the investment capital. That is channeled in a way that can even bring you more money than the $100. But it all has to be financial engineering. So I believe that first we have to appreciate the value of remittances. Because if people are sending money, hard-earned money, And anybody who has lived abroad would appreciate how difficult it is to earn $1 or £1 or €1. So first we have to appreciate what remittances are and provide certain incentives to our diasporans to help them actually increase their level of remittances. That's the first. The second is, as I said, re-engineer our remittances into investment capital, which then becomes even more profitable to our economy.
Very good.
And for example, when I was ambassador in the United States, I created an institution similar to Western Union and MoneyGram. I actually went in for a charter, which would then have created Ghana's own Western Union. Can you imagine the amount of money channeled through the current existing so-called transfer companies, all that being channeled into something that Ghana would have control and actually become investment for those who will be contributing money. Yeah, so if you remit $100, part of that can even become part of your share capital in the company. So it's all a question of leadership.
Very good. Before I turn it over to Simon to ask the very first question, you mentioned diaspora. It's something that for the past 13 years that I've been back home, we've been screaming and screaming and screaming that we have so much talent in the diaspora, and we are not actually finding an effective way to embrace that talent to help with our development. When Rwanda, war-torn country, Kagame came into power, he opened up and called for all the diasporans that he's got all over and put them in positions of leadership within his administration. Go to Rwanda today and look at what's happening. We seem to sit here and think that it is a zero-sum game, that the diasporans will come and displace us and all of that, and that we need to be able to find a way with good leadership, move away from that and embrace our diaspora to help with development. Because you need education, experience, and exposure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the education can get the same education here, but the experience and exposure is coming out from there. And if we exclude them from the process, our development is going to lag.
You are preaching to the converted. But it comes back to one challenge. We don't celebrate our heroes. I was just talking about creating a new institutional vehicle that would have mobilized our remittances. I also created the Ghana Skills Bank when I was ambassador. And that was a digital platform that documented the experience and skills of Ghanaians worldwide. This was as far back as 2001. Exactly what you're saying, because you need a mechanism for identifying and documenting the skills. And I was amazed at the capacity, human capacity, that even in the United States alone, chief executive of this, managing director of this, And so the Ghana Skills Bank then was supposed to become the instrument of identifying our human resource potential in the diaspora and then bringing them into public and private sector structures. So it's just the lack of continuity in governance. I created this after that.
Let's see how we can revive it. I'm Chairman.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Alan Kyerematen. My question is very simple. The ethos of this FDI platform is the constitutional imperative that foreign direct investment shall be encouraged within Ghana, subject to any law for the time being in force regulating investment in Ghana. Article 36(4) of our 1992 Constitution. My question is that foreign direct investors are having difficulties with Ghana. Now, the best testimony of coming to invest in Ghana is an existing foreign direct investor. The problem we have is the state is unable to resolve conflict amicably, resulting in arbitration, external arbitration, which often results in debt to the country. Having been a long time Minister of Trade and someone within this space, what would you do if you are elected president to ensure that the issues or differences or grievances of foreign direct investors are resolved before it gets to this stage where we go on arbitration? So that's my question number one. I only have two questions.
Okay.
The second question is directly linked to the predicaments of foreign direct investors, which is that Ghana, we've developed a good system of attracting FDI, but we have a very poor system of maintaining the FDI in the country. Why do I say so? You could wake up one day as a foreign investor, having made your projections over 20 years and having all your stability clauses, only to find out that some government agency has gone to parliament to pass a law literally asking you to hand over your business. So what would you do in your capacity as president to ensure the rationalization of these weekly and monthly policies and regulations and laws that more or less is making the country unattractive for FDI? I'll leave the VAT and others to my other colleagues. So thank you very much.
Okay, you can answer.
Oh,
Go ahead.
we take a few or no?
No, you
Okay.
you answer.
So first, Simon. Now
Yes.
you recall I made reference in my remarks to the conditions precedent for FDI, and one of them was the existence of fair, equitable judicial system that respects sanctity of contracts. You know. So that is a must if you want to attract and also retain. And it's a lack of recognition of the importance of this precondition precedent that is creating this challenge. And it comes back to leadership, and that's why I already isolated it as one of the conditions. When you say condition precedent, it means that if it does not exist, it will not happen. And if you have a leader who may not appreciate this, then obviously you will not take steps to ensure that. So you are preaching to the converted, and that's why I think it's a condition that we cannot run away from. Yes, because let's face it, once you enter into a contract, there's a principle of stability of contract and sanctity of contract. And if there's a dispute, then there's a reference point almost invariably in the contract. Provisions for dispute settlement in the event of that dispute not being settled, either you go into a court of competent jurisdiction or you go into arbitration. But let the system work and let the structures work. It is when you set the rules and you try to avoid it, I think that's when you have challenges. But with respect to policy stability, again, you are preaching to the converted. Because if, for example, you have an investment promotion regime on the basis of which people make certain decisions, but particularly foreign investors, then it does not mean that they can never be changed. But it means that if there is the need for change, there has to be a consultation process. There has to be a consultation process. And that is why part of the conditions that I set was a business regulatory environment that consists of this whole process of consultation between government and investors.
But why a need for consultation? Why do you have to make it retroactive? I came in here to invest, to start a business. And I came in based on the principles and everything that I saw, and then I signed and I made an investment. So it has to be looking forward, not backwards, and saying that now you are going to consult with me to try to amend what I signed with you, that will not fly. I want to be able to come with new policies and all that,
Yeah.
moving forward, so that new entrants that are coming in
Yeah.
will begin with that and moving forward. But mine is grandfathered,
Yeah.
so that there shouldn't be any change in that. I think that's, Simon, I think that's what you are preaching.
Well, but in a sense, we are talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Because when you believe in policy stability and
Yeah.
policy consistency,
Yeah.
then that becomes the only way to deal with much of this.
Yeah.
But then it does not mean that, as you rightly said, that you cannot move forward.
Yeah.
You know, so for example, you have a policy that provides a certain framework on the basis of which you make an investment. So for policy consistency, you are, as it were, keeping faith with that. But economic development is dynamic,
Yeah.
and things may arise which will require new policy interventions.
Yeah.
So that is where the trade-off comes in. When you make sure that there's consistency, but at the same time, there's an opening for policy renewal. The two are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go to France?
All right. Today, what I want to do is actually introduce one of our gold members. Last time I asked a question, but I want to give the opportunity to one of our gold members who has a tremendous experience in manufacturing, who actually brought manufacturing in Ghana via the investment of Volkswagen, who's been in the automobile industry, Universal Motors. So let me introduce Subi Akkad, who's going to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Honorable. Honorable, the questions that I can ask, it will take us till tomorrow. I will limit myself to a few. And the most important thing, it's very well known that Ghana is very rich. It's not a hidden story. We are rich with its people, number one. Gold, gas, oil, everything, all the minerals, agriculture, weather. We can be the attraction for everything. And as we always said, we are in the center of the world. There is nothing that can stop us from moving forward with a steady economy. But my first question, why up till now can't we have a stable currency? Because as a foreign investor coming into Ghana, they want to know, they want to prepare their budget, they want to move forward, and they want to know that when they are putting $1, they're getting minimum $1 back, not 50 cents or 60 cents because of the exchange rate. So this is the major issue for foreign investors. Then we go into the other issue, which is policies. Policies are very good. We have lived and worked together on one of the best policies in Africa, which is the auto policy, for example. Unfortunately, it's not fully implemented up till now. How can we secure for foreign investors when they come into the country that policies are fully implemented? Number three, and that's very important for everybody here, is environment. Environment policy, which is, in essence, that will include galamsey, that will include water, that will include the use of all the resources in the appropriate way to develop any industry that we want to bring into the country. As I said, I will stop here, Honorable,
Please do.
otherwise we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's good that this question is coming from Subi, because both of us can take credit for this very revolutionary policy innovation in assembling cars, vehicles in Ghana. Now, the two of us, and he knows what I'm talking about, that we work day and night formal, informal consultations to make this happen. And we prepared a policy that is acclaimed and acknowledged globally, even though we're a small startup country. And that is why for the first time, you have 5 out of the 6 major global auto companies all assembling in Ghana. With, and it's just policy, no cost. It's just manpower, brain power. You know? And it's the first time that you have not just these big multinational companies all competing in a small market, but each of them entering into the market with more than 4 or 5 models.
What
Doesn't
are-
happen
what are the
anywhere.
si- what
So
are
if
the
you take
6
Volkswagen, for example,
Volkswagen.
they are doing Passat, they are doing Tiguan, they are doing Paramount, they are doing Polo, and he knows, you know. So this is a major development. The two of us, you ask him. Nissan came in, he's a dealer with Nissan. Nissan came in from Japan headquarters and he invited me to come and sit with them. Within a matter of 2 hours, the deal was made. But then it's not just about making the deal, it's following up to guarantee the commitment that you make. So what he's talking about is real. So we do the deal making, we anchor it with a policy, and we shepherd it through cabinet and to parliament. Now, it is the responsibility of the Parliament of Ghana not to frustrate decisions that have been taken to support the government. And he knows what I'm saying, that the commitments made in the policy to provide certain guarantees and incentives, you know, have not been respected. So that's why we are talking about policy stability and policy consistency. But that's the more reason why Alan should become president. Because if you understand the game, why would you allow any arm of government to destabilize this? No, but I think that he's right, because he went to all lengths to commit to being part of that deal. You know, and it's unfortunate that I even established an auto development center before I left government, just to be able to anchor the whole industry. And it's not just about assembling cars. We've initiated a policy to produce the spare parts and the components that are being assembled. So
What do you think is the main
3
reason
years,
why it's not being implemented?
yes, like you said,
What's the main reason why?
there's policy and there's legislation.
Yes.
And it is saying that they should be fighting over it, because you have to respect the laws. I mean, it's there. That is why he's raising it. You know, so
What would you do as president?
make sure that it gets done. It gets done, because I mean, there's no reversal. There's no reversal to it. So that's why I talked about leadership. It all comes back to leadership. If you understand this game, there's no way that you allow things like this to happen. So I feel that he's not happy, and I can understand him. Now, the second thing he talked about is currency stability. Currency stability is a question of demand and supply. Basically, that is what it is. If you are able to earn more forex, it strengthens your currency. Because then you have a situation where you have more foreign exchange coming in, and then it means that your strength, the strength of your currency automatically becomes high. But then the question is, how do you earn more foreign exchange? You have to export. It is 101 economics. You have to export. How many leaders in Ghana have you heard talking about exports since independence? It's about leadership. You know, so if we don't export, we will not have the foreign exchange to support our local currency. But once you're exporting and any more foreign currency, you have to reduce your imports. And by reducing your imports, it means that you have to produce locally. And you have to produce locally, it means that your interest rates have to come down. It means that you have to have a stable currency because you may have some imported import content. It all means that inflation should come down. So all the things reinforce each other. It is not a complicated matter, I can assure you. You know, so that in the long run has to happen. But in the interim, there are measures that need to be undertaken to stabilize the currency, at least within the. So number one, currency is traded through three sources. Officially through the central bank and the commercial banks. Secondly, through forex bureaus and through the black market. That is an undercover operation. So if you deal with the first two, you can deal with the last one. The banks, together with the central bank, have a structured program for trading in currency. So that's not difficult. The difficulty is with the forex bureaus. And because they are doing supply and demand, obviously, any forex bureau dealer will tell you that if he can increase the rate that he offers, of course you'll get more business. And then that becomes a spiral. So there has to be very strict control on the operations of the forex bureau. Number two, when people lose confidence in an economy, whether you are generating cedis or dollars in the economy, everybody wants to seek refuge in foreign currency because you are unable to predict the volatility of the currency. Yeah. And so the safest means for protecting the value of your revenue or your income is to buy dollars or any other foreign currency. So when there's loss of confidence in the economy, there's nothing you can do. People will clamor for more forex, even when they have no business in, as it were, conserving forex. So how do you deal with that? You have to send very strong signals that the economy will recover. For part of the challenge we have now is that if we are really being serious as a country, neither the NDC nor the NPP can restore that hope and confidence in our economy. If you bring in the right leadership, look, the signals on the radar will show you that the investors will know that there's no need to rush and that you have a stable path that you can follow. So that crisis of confidence in the economy is part of the reason. Number three, the government needs to negotiate, and you have to be very careful when I'm talking to foreign investors. The government needs to negotiate with our friends who have the legal right to transfer their hard-earned income dividends as part of the, I would say, the repatriation of proceeds. But almost every investor that I've known whilst I've been in government, they are, I would say, sentimentally attached to Ghana. They want Ghana to succeed. You understand? So if you sit down and you have a clear path and you are talking to them, not at the last minute you come and you try and create challenges. If you are talking to them, if there is the need for deferral and they can help you, they will easily do it. You see, you don't drive them to a situation where they themselves have no option. You know. So there are many other things, but if you read the GTP, there are very specific proposals. I'm confident that if we follow my proposals, within a maximum of 1 year, the currency will not just stabilize, but it will be stabilizing for a very long time. Now people have lost they have lost so much faith in politicians that even when you talk, Subi is not smiling.
Now, the next will be Canada, West Canada.
Of course, he talked about environment,
Yeah.
but
Oh.
I also have a 10-point plan to deal with Galamsey. But because we don't have time, we can't get into it. You know, it's a question of leadership, strategy, and organization. There has to be a complete ban for 1 year of small-scale and community mining. A complete ban. Within that 1 year, you restore the water bodies. You have no choice. You restore the degraded forest within that 1 year period. And then you also demobilize all the machinery and equipment, including the earth-moving equipment. You demobilize it under strict security operation with the field engineers of, but not this is not work for district assembly. Anyway, we can get into more detail.
Canada, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Kweku Kalmoni. I'm very happy to represent the Canada Chamber. I think this is a very wonderful thing. The real estate industry is one of the biggest industry, I think, and the second biggest employer after farming. It gives very good jobs. And even the factories, which the auto industry needs, commercial buildings, and all the homes, we need it. And it's very important to know what the Honorable Alan Chairman is going to do about the 5% house tax, because we want it to be reduced to 0. And another thing, obviously talking about finance, you also need to have affordable mortgages. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
I agree with both. And in fact, they are part of my plan. You know, because I can speak more about what happens in the United States. The whole strength of the United States economy many years back was basically anchored on what Fannie Mae and then basically that was the housing sector that propelled initially, you know, the growth of wealth in the United States. That and then small and medium enterprises. And so I agree with you 100% in terms of the wealth. And then secondly, with mortgage financing, we all know that nobody who lives outside pays fiscal cash for property, you know. So it has to be providing incentives to foreign investors, local investors, to enter into the mortgage financing business. So I agree with you.
Okay.
And it's all part of my recommendation.
Very good. Okay, why don't you move to
Thank you very much. My name is Charling Wiarde from the Ghana Netherlands Business Council. For us, cocoa is very important, and my question, first question is about cocoa. We see a lot of issues with the cocoa board. We have companies who are member with the GNBC, with our chamber, who have supplied to the cocoa board, and they're not getting paid because there's no money. We have there's a lot of farmers who are getting older and older in Ghana and cannot get their sons or relatives to take over. So you see a diminishing of cocoa farmers, and then also where the cocoa is grown, that's affected by the galamsey. And we were talking about Ghana. Cocoa is a very big foreign currency earner for Ghana, and I'm afraid that if nothing will be done, this will affect Ghana big time for many years to come. The other question I have is about the GIPC, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. They are the ones, if you are a foreign investor, you go and through them, they make the rules, set the rules. But these past 8 years, we've seen that a lot of the foreign investor companies have been confronted by other sets of rules from the Minerals Commission or from the Energy Commission who apparently overrule the GIPC. And I was hoping, I wanted to know your view about that, to make the GIPC basically the highest authority who can overrule all these other commissions who have their own set of rules, which are sometimes not in the interest, or all the times not in the interest of foreign investors. Thank you very much.
Just a minute. He's seated by South Africa, so let's take the two so that we can.
No problem.
Yes.
Thank you very much for articulating your GTP. It's sensible, and it does articulate a movement for change. Our members will appreciate that. I had focused my question on Galamsey, but as you've already addressed that in a couple of ways, I won't take that question. I'm going to focus more on the South African inward investment over the last decade has dwindled to almost nothing. We were the top African foreign investor into Ghana for several years, and we no longer have an appetite for Ghana. Along with the other international chambers, it seems like we've been at war with the GIPC for the last 7 or so years. And I don't mean that in any light way. How could, under your leadership, the different chambers, including the Ghana chamber, be given a seat at the table at the window into Ghana, the GIPC, not to form policy at all, but to have a say and encourage investors into Ghana? What happens over the last 7 years is the GIPC, as a propaganda machine for the government, says something, and it is really propaganda. Those companies then come to the chamber and say, what is the real position? And you see it on the league tables, where we've gone from fairly decent FDI inflows to all-time lows. We don't have a seat at the table, none of the chambers, and we therefore don't lend our voice in any positive way to encourage investors. So notwithstanding all the policy changes that must happen and the leadership that must be shown, the chambers equally have a responsibility, but we need to have a seat at the table. Thank you.
So we'll just add from the Spanish chamber and then the Japan external. Then you.
There are still duties and taxes on raw materials and the high cost of power for manufacturing, making Ghana uncompetitive for manufacturing. What would you do about that if you are elected president?
To make Ghana competitive in manufacturing. Yes, Japan?
My name is Frank from Japan External Trade Organization. So we have Japanese companies that might be interested in the Ghanaian market, but they usually don't have any information on this market. So we have to convince them what sectors are probable for their investments. So in your opinion, what would be the top 3 sectors that you would want to invite FDI into Ghana?
All right. Thank you. Over to you, sir. Then we'll go to the next round of questions.
Thank you very much, and these are very insightful questions. Cocoa. So, like my friend from Netherlands indicated, the challenge with cocoa is hydra-headed. There are issues related to production, particularly with aged farmers, and encouraging expansion in the acreage under production. There are issues related to cocoa board, and then the financing of cocoa, and then also marketing. Now, with production, it's very clear that the current acreage under production has significantly dwindled over the years, rather than being expanded. And there are many reasons for this. Part of the reason is that many cocoa farmers have literally mortgaged their land for Galamsey for whatever reason. Secondly, I think that yes, cocoa, small-scale farming, smallholder farming in cocoa has served as well. But going into the next 3-5 decades, we need to appreciate the fact that if we want to expand our acreage under cocoa, we have to complement the smallholder farming with large-scale plantation development. That is what Cote d'Ivoire has been doing for many years. It's not rocket science. Yes, there's value in smallholder farming for cocoa, but it's not mutually exclusive to large-scale plantation development. And we have to invest more in making cocoa farming profitable. In fact, cocoa farmers are the poorest of all, I think, farmers in Ghana. And yet they produce the golden eggs for Ghana. And so in terms of the benefit, optimizing the benefit from the value of cocoa to our farmers, that has to change significantly. It's not just a question of increasing producer prices. There needs to be a recalibration of how much value is retained for farmers. You can't have a $1 billion industry and then have change, coins and change coming to farmers. Obviously, there's no incentive for them to increase production. So there's a challenge with that. But I think the real elephant in the room is Cocoa Board. The bureaucracy that has been associated with Cocoa Board is a major part of the problem. And I have advocated in my GDP that there is no economic reason for Ghana, and for that matter Cocoa Board, to be borrowing and syndicating $2 billion every year to finance cocoa purchases. Because farmers are not paid, they are paid in cedis. So what are we borrowing the money to? We have to use local currency to pay for cocoa, so that the revenue that is due from the sales of cocoa would come into our economy and not to be used to repay the syndicated loan. And I'm happy that as soon as I announced this, Cocoa Board that had already programmed to go into the market, all of a sudden have decided that they won't do syndication again. So at least, even though I'm not president, they are listening. And that makes sense. A lot of it is going to change from there. And then I must say also that there has to be increased value addition. Currently, if you look at the level of value addition to cocoa, it used to be 40%. I don't know whether it's gone further than that. But I will encourage those investors who are in cocoa processing, Cargill. I was very instrumental as ambassador to the United States in bringing Cargill to Ghana. Cargill, I think there's also the French company. I hope they are still there. Barry Callebaut, they are still there. And a few others that we must start increasing the level of value addition, so that we can retain more of the value for cocoa processing in our country. So that's the message I would also like, and then give them incentives to do that. Yes. I don't know, I think you wanted to add, yeah. Say that.
Privatization of the Cocoa Board.
It's a major recommendation in the GTP. Just as we introduce private sector participation in cocoa buying. You see, PBC has been a dead cow for many years. And as soon as they introduce private sector participation in the buying of cocoa, it's increased significantly the performance of the buying agent. So that is indeed my proposal. Then GIPC, South Africa. Was it South Africa?
Yeah, South Africa.
Yeah, South Africa. Yes, it's unfortunate that that you are reporting on the decline in South African investments, because I think for Africa, if Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, and Cote d'Ivoire and Egypt, if we can strengthen our strategic partnership, Africa will rise again. And the last thing that should occur is for a decline in South African investments, because frankly it should rather be escalating. And I say this passionately because when Mandela was brought out of prison in 1994, and he realized that his biggest challenge was going to be how to improve business opportunities in South Africa. He invited about 7 experts from around the world, and I was one of them. So I've been sentimentally attached to South African business, working together with. I introduced Enterprise South Africa many years back, and so I think that when Alan becomes president, your numbers will grow.
And he wants to see that he had really.
Yes, the GIPC needs a complete overhaul. The institution, the legislation, and I think that, as he rightly pointed out, the link between the GIC law and other subsidiary legislation that seems to be conflicting with the overall spirit of the GIPC. I mean, in the area of investment, GIPC law must be the parent law. And so there has to be alignment and consistency between subsidiary legislation and then the GIPC law. So that's all part of the reforms are proposed.
If it's any consolation, the commissions, it's getting to our sector as well. So we are in the same boat.
Okay.
And so Spanish, so how do we make Ghana, competitive?
Yes, Ghana being competitive in manufacturing. I'm happy she's talking about manufacturing. The only way Ghana can rise again is not just through macroeconomic stability, which is the foundation, but is also through an increase in investment in the productive sectors of our economy, industry or manufacturing and agriculture. And the only way we can do this goes back. Stable currency, low interest rates, low inflation, and then making sure that the companies that are operating in Ghana, whether foreign or local, have access to affordable energy, have access to land which has no controversy, has access to water, to waste management services, all the kind of facilities and services that can make industries competitive, has to be provided by government in collaboration with the private sector. And again, now I'm proud to say that I was the major lead when I was Minister for Trade and Industry under President Kufuor's government to establish the Tema-Free Zone enclave. Because for many years, it was all bush. And I made sure that I prevailed upon the World Bank to provide the financing that will enable us establish first-class off-site infrastructure, because it's all off-site infrastructure that will support the attraction of investors into the enclave, And now that the Thermal-Free Zone is full, before I left office, I also initiated the establishment of the biggest project in Ghana, which is the new industrial city in the greater Kumasi area, 5,000 acres. So once you provide industrial enclaves where there is an aggregation of supply of energy, water, waste management, all the kind of things that will make a manufacturing entity competitive, so they can locate in that industrial enclave. And I think apart from the general macro conditions, those physical assets also help to make Ghana competitive.
Thank you. Japan wants to know your top 3 sectors to invest.
Yes.
Could you say energy is number 1?
Energy obviously is one of them. But I've identified 10 new strategic anchor industries. It's all in my GTP. And I would say that obviously energy is one, but energy that changes our energy mix and then the profile. Sure. Now that we have energy transition, so that's the kind of investment in energy that I'll be looking at. But I also want us, since he's talking about new sectors for growth, the pharmaceutical industry. Ghana imports almost like 70% of our pharmaceutical medication requirements. 70%. And just by supporting, I would say, large-scale WHO standard pharmaceutical companies with the establishment of what they call API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredients. Without that capacity, it's very difficult for you to feed pharmaceutical companies. Otherwise, they have to import all the components and the ingredients. So, pharmaceutical is definitely one. I still sentimentally am attached to the vehicle assembly and then component manufacturing. It's not just vehicle assembly, component manufacturing. I'm attached to, of course, Toyota is here in Ghana, yeah. So that should interest them. And I'm also still attached to the garment and textile industry. Because when you are looking for new strategic anchor industries, there has to be the capacity to create employment. There has to be the capacity to generate export earnings. And these are very important considerations for identifying the new sectors that we like to promote. I mean, if a country like Bangladesh generates every year $30 billion from the export of garments and textiles alone, $30 billion. And I think it was Simon who was talking about Agua.
Yeah, I mean, you were very instrumental in
absolutely, yes.
Agua, but we haven't taken advantage of it.
So
why is that?
It is the capacity, it's the production. What Agua does is to open the largest retail market in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, China is what it is because of the U.S. market.
We
and
fought
so Africa,
so hard to renew this year, and yet the percentage of usage is still this.
It's still this.
Why?
So it's concentrating on production, on manufacturing, and introducing an enterprise economy which will incentivize manufacturing and production. Because if you don't produce, you cannot export. So I think that, and then also vegetable oils, palm oil. You know, Malaysia exports about $20 billion of oil palm products every year.
Yeah, but the palm from that came from here.
They come from here.
Why? Anyway, I don't want to go into that. How much time do we have? 10 minutes.
Okay. Honourable Minister, thank you for the opportunity to engage. We're most grateful.
You have to announce yourself.
I'm Kwesi Yimdake, Red Moon Resources. I guess I've done it clearly. Honourable Minister, listening to all the questions and all the engagement, There's one fundamental one that we seek as a business community, and this is the engagement of a business community that is troubling. It's the macro, and you've reiterated it a number of times. But underpinning this macro difficulty and derailing the macro is the exchange rate, which is not in doubt. There's a clear policy of Bank of Ghana for purposes of price stability that derails all our gains in capital formation, inflationary management, cascading effect of the debt position, the deficit position, on and on. The trade-off is that government makes some revenue by virtue of the 2 weeks adjustment policy, which is a Bank of Ghana policy. And that alone derails all our gains. Respectfully, I believe with your experience, you know this better than I do. What is your singular policy intervention in 60 days? In 60 days, which is a short-term intervention. Because I listened to you carefully. You spoke about export. It's a medium to long-term intervention, 180 days and over. You spoke about remittances. Perhaps you can put it to 90 days. But as a president, in the short term, when you sit down in the first 30 days, by 60 days, you should be able to make a singular intervention for price stability and forex management for purposes of all this business community gathered. All your ambitious projects without this price stability from the forex perspective will come to naught. And I guess we all agree with me, correct? You heard that. What is your singular intervention on this subject matter? We've conducted a research, and the ramifications and the trade-offs are not balancing. That is my first question. My second question, therefore, is regarding tax reforms. What is your next singular intervention on tax reforms that dovetails into the macro for purposes of price stability? And lastly, I had about 4, but I want to cage one. On lastly, he's the champion of AFTA, and he's the champion of regional integration and regional value chains. Am I right, Coca-Cola? So if that is the case, Honorable Minister, or perhaps Honorable Alan Chamantin, in the AFTA contest, a gentleman mentioned that we are not represented on GIPC. I'm not better about GIPC. On the AFTA private sector front, where government sits and they go collectively to make decisions on our behalf for purposes of regional integration, regional value chain, what they call supply chain integration, they leave the meetings, and when they all go to their various countries, like Nigeria did, like today Burkina Faso is doing, like Cote d'Ivoire is doing, and like Ghana did, they become local content averse, and that the concept of integration becomes a cliche or a rhetoric. With all your experience, we need clarity in these 3 dimensions. Thank you.
Can you repeat the last one? I wanted clarity.
The last question.
The last one.
On AFTA,
Yeah.
you are the promoter and the champion of AFTA.
Yes.
And in the AFTA community, they have a consensus that they meet from the foreign perspective. And as a trade minister, he joins the foreign minister to engage on all the protocols and the interventions for us. But once they live there, the difficulty in exporting to the various African countries becomes an issue of a country perspective. And I give a clear example. I recall when we had the policy on what is this thing? Policy. The discount values. And I bring it up because by then we had the CET, the Continental Common External Tariffs, which was triggering in. And it did by the time it took power. So what the consequences was that we were forced to enter that protocol. However, our forex was the worst currency performing then, and other colleagues couldn't understand the dynamics of that protocol. But by signing the continental, what they call the economic zone agreement, you were supposed to comply. This economic zone is what then goes into the other economic zones within to constitute the AFTA. So when AFTA agrees that we've got to do this, our local economists sometimes, through their political manifestos, redefine what is suitable to them. What do you seek to do in terms of harmonizing the expansion of integration? That's what we seek to ask.
Thank you. He is also the AGI president, so no worries. Let's take the last one from Mona.
You wanted to hide that one.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mona Boyd, and I am an American Ghanaian investor in Ghana in the hospitality industry. As we all know, there is just incredible opportunity in this industry, but no one seems to notice from government. And since COVID, destinations that are investing in this industry are receiving anywhere from 20 to 50% increase in arrivals year on since COVID. My question to you is that what would you do about our Ministry of Tourism and our Tourism Authority? What would you do to make those government agencies function and take advantage of the opportunities in tourism for Ghana?
All right, that's a good question for Mona. Please clap. She's a former AmCham president. Yes. What would we say? She's the Mona Lisa of everything else, which is great. So, Honorable, over to you. These are our last two questions.
Okay, very well. So we start with price stability. And Dr. Dake, I wanted to be very sure that I understood your question. Is it about currency stabilization or price stability in terms of inflation? Because you also brought in the angle of the central bank. I just wanted so that yes, yes, yes.
And the policy direction from DOG. So if you do not bring all the three in there, you might not tackle it. That's why I brought in all these dimensions. And I thought I left out.
Oh, come on, don't add anything.
So Mr. Dake, yes. So
60 days.
Absolutely. So I want to deal with it from those three angles. But let me start with the price stability, because you see, as you rightly pointed out, inflation, interest rates, and currency stability, they are all interrelated. But inflation is probably the most important. But that is why if you try and review all the economic discourse in the mature economies, it's about inflation. Now, the Bank of Ghana, I think regrettably, has been pursuing for a very long time a policy described as inflation targeting. That seeks to, in their view, mop up excess liquidity in our economy, which they believe is the single most important factor for high prices. So in economics, if you have too much money chasing a few goods, then it's from the demand side, which then causes inflation. Unfortunately, they have failed to appreciate that the challenge of inflation here has nothing to do with inflation targeting. It is the result of their own policy of increasing the Bank of Ghana policy rates. Because if the Bank of Ghana increases their policy rate, which is the benchmark rate for loans, then automatically you are increasing interest rates. That's the cost of capital. And so once in matured economies, it is appropriate for you to introduce inflation targeting, which is to increase the central bank rate in order to mop up excess liquidity. In Ghana, it's the other way around. Because what happens is that once you increase the policy rate, interest rates go up. The cost of capital to businesses go up. And obviously, the cost of production goes up. It's the single most important element in the cost buildup of any company, apart from salaries and things like that. So you think you are trying to tame inflation, but in actual fact, you are introducing measures that increases inflation. Now, when you are unable to tame inflation, which is the case that we have now, and remember, in 2022, inflation went up as high as 54%. This is basic economics. When prices are high, you reduce the purchasing power of consumers. And when consumers reduce their purchasing power, it means that investors and producers have to limit their production because nobody will buy. Now, when they limit their production, then basically they are reducing, by extension, employment. They have to lay off workers. When they lay off workers, then government loses revenue from paying direct income tax. So the worst thing that can happen to any economy is high inflation. So the solution to this, and you don't even need 30 days. If Alan becomes president, this is a matter of let's say 10 days. Because you see, the central bank has a responsibility to be used as a tool for development. There is no other way for interest rates to come down, for prices to come down, except through shock therapy. Bank of Ghana policy rate is now 29%. So you can imagine, is it 20? No, maybe 20, around 28, 20, yeah. So it means that there is no way interest rates will come down below 35%. That's the base rate. Now, if we don't introduce shock therapy, meaning that we abandon this inflation targeting policy and force down the Bank of Ghana policy rate and bring down the interest rate, it's going to be very difficult. And this has to be coordination between Ministry of Finance and then the central bank, because they're following the wrong policy. They have been consistently increasing the policy rate. Inflation is not coming down. It means that that policy for our economy is not working. Number two, we have to reduce government's appetite for borrowing. When government opens its large mouth to want to consume everything that people are, look, as for people with excess cash, if government wants to buy treasury bills even at 40%, they will provide the money. So government is always, attracted to borrowing, also from the domestic market. And once the private sector recognizes that you are always interested in borrowing, then treasury bill rates will also go up. So treasury bills rates go up, and then the banks will use the treasury bill rate also to fix their interest rates. So whichever way it is, Bank of Ghana policy rate must come down. Treasury bill rates will have to come down only if government stops borrowing. And the only way for government to stop borrowing is to understand that it's about private capital. You see, if government wants to construct all the roads in Ghana, they want to build all the hospitals, they want to build all the schools, then and when you don't have money to do that, then obviously you have to borrow to finance that capital expenditure. If you provide incentives to the private sector to invest in capital expenditure, there will be no need for government to be borrowing. Because government is borrowing to finance consumption, which does not help the economy. So basically, for me, I think that with the central bank working with the Ministry of Government, Ministry of Finance, that will help deal with it. Now, once that occurs, it will have an effect on the stability of the currency. It is automatic. Because once that occurs, it reduces the liquidity, and then there will be you don't have that much money chasing fewer goods. So they are all interrelated. You don't need 60 days to break this into.
So 10 days you stop that.
Yes.
Let's move on to that.
Then the next one,
Tax reform.
the next one is about AFCFTA or tax reform. Yes. The challenge with the tax reform is that we turn our tax reform, our tax architecture upside down. There is no serious economy in the world where government earns more from indirect taxes than from direct taxes. The reason why government imposes more taxes on, let's say, through indirect taxes, because it's the easiest way of collecting taxes. The tax on production at the ports and all that is associated with production is what increases the level of taxes in the economy. You have to reduce all taxes as much as possible on production and then make the private sector earn money, and then you can ask them to pay more on their profits. So you should earn more from direct taxes than from indirect taxes. Currently, we've turned it upside down. We are imposing more taxes on the private sector and they cannot become competitive. And if you turn that around, they'll become competitive. And I've, for example, identified taxes that I can't even believe that these taxes are still in existence. And I've said we have to abolish all of them. Why do we still have to pay COVID-19 levy? Are we hoping that COVID will come back? Why are we paying a levy on disinfect? We are disinfecting. There's a disinfection levy. What are you disinfecting? The economy? All kinds of taxes, frankly. And then last but not the least, the way VAT is calculated now amounts to compounded VAT calculation. Because now, instead of consolidating the 12.5% real VAT with 2.5% NHIA and then 2.5% debt fund, so that you have 17.5, and that is what you apply on any transaction. Right now, they apply 2.5% levy on the 12.5 on the cost of the service, and then add that and calculate 2.5 on the addition. So it is compounded, and that's why a lot of people are losing money from that. So as for tax reform, it's very easy to do tax reform. And last but not the least is AFTA. Again, AFTA is about expanding market opportunities within Africa for African producers. And again, I say this even at the risk of sounding a bit boastful, because I created it from scratch. And so I know it through and through, how it originated and the way it's been negotiated. Now, there were two different components of AFTA that we developed. One was the legislative framework, which is the law, and then the other one is a decision on how to boost local production. So we have two decisions from the summit, one on the law and the other one on how to boost production in Africa. Unfortunately, we only negotiated the law. Everybody has forgotten about the real deal, which is increasing production. So once you are not producing, you cannot trade. I think this is the real challenge. And there has to be a program at the regional level, at the national level, that is supporting the productive sectors in Africa. That is the only way they can produce and trade amongst themselves.
Last question, tourism.
Tourism, Amona, I know it's very dear to your heart. And when you read my GTP, under an Allen presidency, this will be a new paradigm for tourism in Ghana. Ghana has 32 of the 42 UNESCO accredited historical sites. 32 out of the 42. Now what are we doing with these historical sites? And so we need to be able to invest in our tourist infrastructure. But it's not about government investing in it. It ain't gonna happen. Government will never have the money to invest in tourist facilities. We have to incentivize the private sector. They know where to find the money, and then they will invest as long as government provides the incentives for it to be profitable. If you go to Bole Park, I don't know, Mole Park, Mole in North Damogo. For a very long time, government had, motels, some make and shift rooms, motels for since independence. It took one investor to put in new investment in the Mole Park. He charges not less than $400 a night to look at elephants and the place is always full. So you can imagine, it's about investing in our tourist infrastructure, and it's the government supporting the private sector that will do that. Number two, you pointed out what is the role and function of the state agencies. This is not an institution for public servants. You have to put in people who understand tourism. You put in the experts, because they are, and together with the brand Ghana office, they are the ones who will put Ghana on the global market. Number three, we also have to provide incentives to reduce the cost of our hospitality facilities. You go even New York, or let's say Hong Kong, or the prime investment destinations, you can get a decent room, for maybe $200. But look at the rates here in Ghana. It's an incentive. So government now has to support the private sector, those that invest in hospitality facilities, to be able to do. Then government has to support directly and indirectly those of you in the private sector. For example, you've done a great job with your travel and tours. You are promoting Ghana. You are facilitating travels around Ghana. Government has to be able to support you by providing access to low interest rate funds to help you do your business. And there are so many. If you read my GTP, all the assets are there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Please, a big round of applause for him. And the Honorable Alan Chamati is going to present a copy of the GTP plan. Mr. Joe Mensah, you receive it on behalf of all the trade associations. So, okay, they are bringing you a copy. It's a symbolic presentation of the plan. And his is not a manifesto. I heard him say, he says it's a plan. So it's a plan to transform Ghana. Yes. So we'll have this one. So he's presenting it on behalf of all the trade associations. Yes. Thank you. Yes. And thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for him. Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I heard him speak about stability. He said we have to stabilize the economy. From stabilization, we have to move to growth, and then resilience, and to prosperity. Good. On radio, I heard you speak about that, and that was quite intriguing. So thank you very much for joining us today. We wish you the best in your campaign, and please don't forget us in your political kingdom. We say God bless you, and all the best to you. Thank you. Please, we have reception out there. The leaders of the trade associations, please come. We'll take a group photo with him.